Now, it's with great pleasure that I get to introduce another creative model. This is a family building model created by that Ed and Laura Drower are working on. Laura Drower is I'm not even going to list all of her titles. You'll just have to look those up. There's too many letters for me to even start. Don't mind me. She is a pediatric speech language pathologist, and she is the co-owner of We Speech PC, a private clinic in Skokie, Illinois. She resides in Chicago with her husband and their 27-year-old son who has Down syndrome. When she is not working, volunteering, or managing her son's needs, well, I bet you have a lot of time to enjoy reading, gardening, and sipping wine on her balcony. Just tell us when. We'll be there. Ed Drower, MS is a clinical project director at Medline Industries, a medical supply company. Some of us have ordered things from Medline. He returned to Chicago with his family to share the experiences of a great city and explore life's endless opportunities. His hobbies include coaching, home and car repairs, and sailing. And considering what you're taking on, you're going to have a lot more home repairs. Thank you very much. We're looking forward to hearing your story.
Okay. So our first house was that cute little Georgian in the corner. It would be best for us to move to the suburbs. My experience with special ed in Chicago was not great, and I decided that really the North Shore was going to be the best place for us. So packed everything up and moved to that house down on the bottom there in Northbrook. Had another son. Both boys went through the Northbrook schools. Adrian graduated from Glenbrook North, got his driver's license. That's his car there. Got an associate's degree from Oakton Community College, and got an actual paying job at the Botanic Gardens. He was very independent. He drove to work. He drove to his friend's house. He drove to Evanston to Center for Independent Futures. You'll hear from them later. Went out with his friends. We thought, we're in great shape. He's going to be independent, maybe a little bit of supervision, have his own place. It's all good. And then, one day, on my way home from work, I saw his car parked along the side of the road in our neighborhood. And I thought, oh, it's weird, not his friend's house, what's going on? Pulled up behind him, got out, and he was sound asleep. I thought, all right, well, he's taking cold medicine, maybe that's the story. A few more times this happened, and he was diagnosed with severe sleep apnea. So all of our plans changed, no longer driving. Really, at that point, couldn't even take the bus, because if he sat down for longer than 5 minutes, he was sound asleep and would miss any spot and be woken up by the bus driver. So we started thinking about what our new plan would be, since the independent plan that we had originally thought about was not going to be happening. At that time, my other son graduated from high school, and it had always been our hope to get back to the city at some point in time. So we started talking about that being an option, moving back to the city. Our son was going to go to DePaul, our younger son, and we thought, well, you know, this is kind of a perfect time. We'll move back and we'll see if maybe there's some sort of apartment situation that we can find for all of us. Fortunately, Ed and I have always loved old buildings. Our first apartments in our first home were old buildings, and so we thought, well, you know, we'll find like an old 2-flat and fix it up, and Adrian can live in one spot and we can live in another. We tried to think long-term, figuring that when we bought this building, it would be the building that Ed and I would stay in until they carried us out in a box. And then Adrian would have the option of a caregiver or someone else living in our apartment while he still had his own home, and nothing would change for him. When we were having these talks, our younger son was part of the conversation and just casually mentioned to him, you know, is this something that you would be interested in living? Every mother's dream to have all of her kids living with her in one building. And he said yes, he would. And full disclosure, at the time we were talking about Lincoln Park, Roscoe Village neighborhood. And so it didn't sound too terrible to him to have his own apartment in Lincoln Park with no rent. But we were looking, you know, for a neighborhood where my son would be able to walk. He would have access to public transportation. There would be entertainment, his shopping, food, and whatnot. So we settled on Roscoe Village, which is Addison and Western, close enough to Wrigley to walk there, but far enough to be away from the crowds. Cubs fan, full disclosure. And so it took about 2 years of a search to find the building. We were looking for a 3-flat. The first buildings that we looked at were like old Victorians that were 2 flats originally, and they had either added an attic or a duplex down, which means basement, apartment. And we didn't want anyone to be living in the tiny little attic or anyone to be living in the basement. And we also wanted a central stairway so that from the inside of the building, you could get to any of the apartments in the basement, and you didn't have to go outside to access anyone's apartment, to try and make it more a family building. And then we found this lovely 4-flat brownstone, and it's actually 2 stories because there's 2 apartments on each floor. At one end is a 2-bedroom, and at one end is a 1-bedroom. So you can see the center doorway there. That's the center hallway that goes in and accesses all the bedrooms, and then the basement. It also had a 3-car garage and a driveway, which was hugely appealing to my husband and my son. They like to work on cars, and I like to park off the street, so that was an appeal to me too. And what we decided to do was take the top 2 apartments and convert it into one big apartment for Ed and I, and then each of the boys would have an apartment across the hall from each other on the first floor. The central hallway is great. It really makes it much more like a home than an apartment building. We've been living there for about 2.5 years, and we are halfway? Okay, a little less than halfway through construction. There were a lot of issues with the city with zoning. Apparently, our neighborhood is zoned single family. Not that you could ever look at that building and think that ever in its history was it a single family home, but 50 years ago, they rezoned the entire neighborhood, which is probably 50% buildings like this, as single family, so we had to go through zoning. And then we were changing from 4 units to 3 units, which they actually liked because it makes the neighborhood less dense, but it was still a zoning hassle. So finally, about 2 months ago, we started under construction, and I will let Ed take it from there. Oh, one quick story before I hand it over to him. My younger son, who had decided that he would come and live with us and is now living in an apartment on the first floor underneath us. We're living all smashed into half of the top floor while the rest of the building is being worked on. He texted me an article from the Atlantic Monthly about helicopter parents. And I texted him back and I said, "Are you trying to tell me something?" And he said, "Yes, you literally live above my head."
Thank you. All right, so my name is Ed Drower, and I have the luxury of taking you through the rest of this presentation about our plan moving forward. It's a beautiful home. We love it. It's a very old building. Our plans, as Laura has said, have changed in terms of where we were living in the Northbrook area, I guess. And we bought this big building, and now we have to decide, our future. And, everybody here has already talked a little bit about what's going to be your future. How are you going to plan for the future? And, I'm not that far thought thinking, 5 years, maybe 10 years, and then, we have to think long-term for our son. It's always tough to talk about end of life and think of yourself and what's going to happen to your son after you're gone, but it's a discussion you have to have. So we talked about it, and of course, you can't talk about it without bringing in some attorneys. We have a disability attorney we were working with. We found them through ARC, I believe, and the disability attorney is obviously looking for the best situation for your individual child. So the concern from their standpoint was, well, you obviously want to put your building in a trust so that he has someplace to live after you're gone. But we have 2 sons, and we wanted to be fair about this, and trying to talk to the attorney the situation. They said, well, you have to consider him because if your other son should get married and he's living in the building and he happens to marry not such a perfect individual and, you put...
That would never happen.
It would never happen. I've never heard it happen before, but they're out to protect your son and where his future is. And your other son, he'll be fine, so you have to balance that out. So, of course, we had to pick... we had to make a decision on, and I guess we picked the Solomon approach where we divided it in half. And we decided that we put the building in a trust, but they both would have equal access. They couldn't, one could not sell it from the other, and so it was held in there sort of forever, or until one of them would go away. But it would never be lost. It would always be there for him, and he couldn't. The other son couldn't sell it or get anything from it. So we thought that was a fair enough solution. We thought that was equitable for them, and so we thought we'd move on with that. So now we have this building. We have a reasonable plan in place. We have a reasonable path in place, and now it's getting my son into Chicago. Now Chicago was that's my home. I was born and raised in Chicago. Actually, not too far from where we're living right now, which is really bizarre to me. But transition, as everybody here has mentioned, has always been a problem for your individual child. And our son is no different. And so, coming to Chicago from a small community to a very large, bustling city, you might think might be difficult. But, Laura and I have always been, we've always been in the city. We've always wanted to go back to the city. We've actually, when they were growing up, this is where we played. We always left the suburbs to play in the city. Museums, lakefront, beaches, everything was there, and we wanted to get them comfortable with it because there's always opportunities in the city. There's always things to do, and there's always ways to get even from the suburbs to the city. There's always transportation you can get to. So the transition was something we were concerned about, but I think, as Ellen has said, we all learn from our children, and thinking it was going to be difficult, I think as he taught me, he was able to adjust quite quickly and quite easily to the new surroundings. I think he liked the challenge.
From a mother's perspective, he didn't totally like the challenge.
I think
put on a good face to it.
He did. He did put on a good face.
Completely out.
But yeah, seeing how he used to freak out, I didn't see it at all. So it was much less. But I think the other reason we went to this model was because of his condition and because the fact that he's going to need some ability to get around in his life. And public services in the city, public transportation in the city, those are things that everybody has access to, and with some training, he would be able to utilize all of those and feel comfortable in those situations. We enrolled him in this RTA travel training. It's a city-sponsored program for people with disabilities, actually for anybody. And what they do is they get you comfortable with trains and buses and things like that, but it's very personal. We actually had to wait months, I think
6 months.
6 months to actually get him into the program. But once he's in the program, they actually have a person that's dedicated to him that has planned trips. They go with him initially, they do it a bunch of times, they show him where he's going and how he's going to get to places. They travel with him next to him, and then as it progresses, they move to the back of the bus. And then they travel and watch him, make sure he gets off on the stop, he's not going to fall asleep, as we were always concerned about, on the train as well. And so they do that, they wean him off, and then eventually they make him do it, and then they follow in the car to make sure he gets off the bus or the train. Which I thought was great. You never know, and you always wonder, is he going to know where to get off? Is he paying attention? And that type of thing. And it was a really great experience for him. He was able to go from our house. We were about 5 or 6 blocks from the L. He can walk over there. Buses are close by. Takes it downtown. Water Tower Place, Navy Pier. So he was actually more familiar than I am taking those types of transportations to get down there. So that was a really great experience for him.
It's a free service. It was about 10 weeks of individual one-on-one tutoring, 2 hours a week for 10 weeks.
So I think those services are invaluable for him and for us. The other things that we have up here are CIF, as you're going to hear from later today. They're very instrumental, I think, in developing his social network, his friends, programs that they have. We are very close to Evanston. It's just a bus ride to get to the metro for him. Right now, and even earlier, he was taking that to Evanston, where he would be in his programs and different things, and they have, dinners and shows and things down there, and so he's able to get around quite nicely. But CIF has provided a great service for him, the different programs he loves, and we wanted to make sure that he'd be able to continue to do that, since he can't drive very well anymore. The other things that we have that isn't up here is what's it called? The No Boundaries is another service group. It's in Evanston. It helps him to prepare for finding a job. It helps him get his CV or his resume together. It helps him to interact, practice interviewing and things like that. And he's been very successful doing that and getting through that program. And they've actually helped him to get into what they call, your venture card. If you're not from Chicago, the public transportation now has gone to this kind of a credit card thing. But for people with disabilities, they helped him to get it so that it's free for him. So he can travel anywhere he wants to go by Metro or by the public transportation, and he always has a way. He's never going to be wondering, do I have enough dollars to get where I need to go back and forth? So it's kind of peace of mind if you want to look at it like that. So what is Adrian, the other aspect of why we moved here was to make sure there were things close by that he could walk to or get to quickly and easily. He is working right now. He's working for a company actually downtown near the Merchandise Mart. So 3 days a week he has to take the train, get off the Merchandise Mart, and actually walk a couple blocks to get to his job. And he works, it's a tile company called The Fine Line. I know Laura's going to jump in.
He has actually gotten lost in the Merchandise Mart several times because the company that he works for has him run errands now that they're comfortable with him, and he uses his phone to help him navigate.
Yes. But it's funny, when he comes home, he actually now tells us these stories where he had an experience at a loss like this. Normally he wouldn't, he would be embarrassed by it, but I guess he's taking after me.
He doesn't come right home. It's usually a week or two later that he'll say, "Oh yeah, I missed my stop and ended up 5 neighborhoods over," or so.
So the Fine Line, I should go back. No Boundaries was instrumental in getting him a position at this job he has right now. He did he had a job at Botanic Gardens. When we moved away, obviously there's no way of getting up to the Botanic Gardens. The No Boundaries helped him to interview for jobs. He took an internship. He worked in a couple little places, different places where there was a lot of social interaction, little stores and things like that. And then one of the stores from there recommended him to this job he has right now. It's a tile company called The Fine Line. It's a fabulous place for him, and he's been there almost a year now, and it's been really very successful for him. So he's gotten used to commuting. He actually likes walking around our neighborhood. It's a pretty safe neighborhood. No, nothing in Chicago is actually safe. So, but for him and for paying attention and that's all he really needs to do is make sure he's aware of his surroundings. I think it's pretty safe. But he does do a lot of walking around, and he does take the train where he needs to. He actually has he sees his psychologist. He has to take the train to go see the psychologist once a week or so. He is in a training program. There's a personal trainer nearby, like a small little trainer called Victory Training. He's there a few days a week. So he's actually, enveloped himself within the community. So
he has a favorite little sandwich place. The grocery store is about a 5-minute walk away.
So he's adjusted. And now I can get into, I guess, what we're doing with the building. As Laura mentioned, the top floor, we've kind of decided we're going to take over. I don't know if that was a great move. We're getting older, but it's a small 2-story.
We put a lift on the back of the building when we need it, so we should
But
be okay.
we do have both of our sons now. We will have both of our sons below us, which is great. We have plans. This is sort of the work that's going on right now. It had to be completely gutted. It was a very old building. It was over 100 years old. So as you can imagine, no insulation. I'm not even sure. I don't even want to guess what the wiring was like. The plumbing was almost on its last leg. I don't even think it was working toward the end. We actually had people living there, and I don't know why they lived there renting, because
there were tenants when we bought
it was not a really good. I would have never lived there. But we have done a lot of work so far. We're getting close. It's been about like a 2-year project, but I'm not doing it, but actually most of this work's happened in the last month or two. But it'll all be done. We're trying to keep it in the same flavor of the neighborhood, you know, and make it accessible. He'll have his own kitchen and everything. He's got a living room. It's about 1,100 square feet, living room, dining room, 1 bedroom. You know, he'll take on all of the, he does have his own gas and his own electric meter because it is an apartment building. But, you know, he'll be living there, and the funds that we get or that he receives, you know, help to support some of his activities here. The nice part about it is, you know, we have, like you say, like most of your children, you know, he's independent, but is he really independent? We're trying to get him into cooking. We'll make him cook once a week for us. I hope that'll work. Just to get him more independent. He has washer, dryer, and that kind of thing in the basement, so he'll have access to hopefully learn and do a lot of those activities. We hope to add more things like a roof deck. So, you know, the city doesn't have much yard. You have to build on top of your garage if you want a deck or if you want some kind of living space
Outdoor
outside.
space, yeah.
So we'll have to do that. But it's coming along. I think it's going to be very good for him. I think it'll give him the independence he wants. And as other people have mentioned, we can close our door and we have that barrier. And this is kind of like a pre-built type of situation. Still something we have to fix, but at least it's another option if you're looking for an alternative to kind of manage that.
He's already feeling some ownership of his apartment. The way the building has worked out, there's one unit that was already finished, that was the owner's unit where my younger son is living. Right now, the 3 of us are living in the 2-bedroom on top, and they're working on the other side. And when his apartment is finished, we'll all move into that apartment while they finish ours. And when I just casually mentioned to him, yeah, probably in another month or 2, we'll all be moving into your apartment. And he said, wait, what do you mean we'll all be moving into your apartment? I said, well, that was always the plan. He was not happy with that plan. So he's definitely getting into his head that he's got his own space. We're right there, literally 3 feet away, but he closes his door and we're not there.
So we'll hopefully post some pictures. This is his website.
He has a blog.
He has a blog, and so he'll be posting pictures, and hopefully he'll be in there soon, and we hope he'll be in there soon.
His brother's a computer science major. He set the blog up for him. So.
Do we have any quick questions for Laura and Ed?
I don't think I needed. Did you get Section 8 funding, or?
Well, that's a really good question. We went into looking into Section 8 housing.
The attorney asked us to look into that, and we just have not pursued it.
We don't know enough about it right at this point. I don't think it's something we're ready to get into without a little bit more information.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Over there, 1 second, Connie.
It was very interesting to hear about the RTA travel training. Is that just for Chicago residents? And is there an age?
I don't think it's just for Chicago
No,
residents.
Pace does it, yeah.
Okay, that was the question.
Yeah, I don't know if there was any age limit on it. They didn't mention that, but
Or beginning ages, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the low end of it
no, I
was.
don't.
Anyone else?
Oh.
One in the back, hang on. I'm
You
coming.
should have walked back.
It's lunchtime, I can't believe you're doing this to me.
Did we go over?
We can have dessert, 2 desserts. Maybe I missed it, but is your son getting any, like home support services or anything like that?
Yes, he got pulled from the PUNS list for home
I
based.
can't hear.
He got pulled for the PUNS list for home base.
What kind of services?
He's doing tutoring.
This is where I leave.
That's right. Yeah, I'm the keeper of all the knowledge. He's doing the a life skills tutoring program with CIF, so he gets work on budgeting and cleaning and cooking and all of those type of events. And then he's also still doing the No Boundaries Train for Work, Train for Life program in Evanston.
Time for one more, here you go.
Do you anticipate having to set up any quote-unquote house rules about girlfriends moving in, friends staying over.
There's no moving in.
You know, those kinds of things that happen as a young man get to be adults.
You know, that's a great question, and what I didn't mention was, he has a really good connection with his friends. They do a lot of Skyping, so that's since all of his friends are not necessarily, we moved away from all of his friends, if you will. Skype and those kind of internet connections have really, he's on it every day, and they group together. There's like 3 or 4 of them that get together, and they're constantly on it. So, maybe there'll be some chance for some of his friends that can actually come and visit. It's really kind of difficult, I think, sometimes. But in terms of rules and stuff, whenever he's ready to make those kind of choices, we'll be ready to make the rules.
How about a nice round of applause for Ed and Laura?